Let's go.
Welcome back to the Superman podcast. I'm Matt McCabe here with co-host Lionel O'Malley. Today we're tackling an important topic, mental health, especially for men. Lionel, we've seen some alarming trends, haven't we?
Absolutely, Matty. Yeah, the financial stress is a major driver of mental health issues in Australia. According to the Australian Bureau of Statistics, more than 4.3 million Australians experience a mental disorder each year, and financial strain is a significant contributing factor. Shockingly, around 3,249 people took their own lives in 2022, with men making up about 75% of these deaths. Financial pressures play a key role, and it's time we talk openly about it, I think.
And we've got a special guest today to help us talk about this, Lionel. Simon Rinne, a husband, father, podcaster, and mental health influencer. After 15 years in the public service, Simon founded the Mindful Men podcast. Over the last 3 years, Simon has had over 139 episodes, speaking with experts from a plethora of fields, focusing on getting men to talk, tools to navigate life stages, relationships, behavior, nutrition, psychologist, and even personal development. Please welcome Simon.
Boys, thanks for having me on. Really excited to be here. 139 episodes of the Mindful Men podcast makes me feel really old in the podcasting space, but there's probably another 100 I've been a guest on, so now I feel ancient. But yeah, no, really excited to be here. Talking about financial health, it's something that comes up in the work that I do quite frequently. I am a therapist, and I do talk to men across Australia about financial mental health. And so I'm really grateful to be here and continuing the discussion on this platform.
Yeah, that's amazing, Michael. You're a veteran of the podcast world, mate. We could learn a lot from you. But yeah, today we're gonna talk and dive a little bit deeper into the topic that no one likes to really talk about. And it's a bit of a daunting thing to talk about these days as well. But at the same time, it's been more talked about lately, so people are becoming more familiar with it. So just to sort of give everyone a little bit of a background, I guess, Michael, was where we connected. Simon. We connected on a Facebook group for Aussie podcasters. So you threw out the idea that Nathan Stapleton, you had him on your podcast. Was it recently?
Yeah, Stapo, like quite a while ago, actually. So I do a lot of work in the disability space as well as mental health, and Nathan's contact details came across my desk as a great person to have a chat with. And I mean, I'm not a rugby fan. Like, I live in Queensland, but I'm from Adelaide, so I'm an AFL guy. So when I get this rugby league guy coming across my desk to have a chat with, I'm like, do I really want to do this conversation? But I'm so glad I did, because Nathan's got an amazing story where, we talked about growing up and playing rugby, and then ultimately a rugby league incident where he's playing country footy and resulted in a spinal cord injury, and now lives with quadriplegia. And so talking about the change in his life of playing the game that he loved and causing so much disruption in his life, now reliant on disability supports for the rest of his life just to live and get through every single day. So really enjoyed having Nathan on the show, but also a whole range of other people on the show from similar backgrounds as well. Perry Cross comes to mind as well. Grew up playing rugby in Queensland as well, and now really leads research into spinal cord rehabilitation from injuries as well. So yeah, lots of interesting chats, and yeah, Nathan was just one of many that I've had over the years.
So let's strip it back a bit, Simon. And how did Mindful Men come about?
Yeah, so it's my own mental health story, really. So grew up in Adelaide, as I said.
Are you a Crows or Port man?
I'm a Crows fan. And the best highlight of this year for me is now looking forward to the draft, where we get some good draft picks. It's about as good as it gets. But yeah, grew up watching footy, playing footy. I grew up with three brothers in the household, so very much you would say an alpha male household in the 80s and 90s. And I grew up in the northern parts of LA, which is a pretty rough area to grow up in. And it just formulated how I identified with being a boy and a man. And I think so many guys listening to this show would probably agree. It's like, It's that suck it up mentality. Like, to be a boy, be a man is to bottle everything up, don't show emotions, get through your day, just deal with your stuff. Don't ask for help. Deal with it.
Eat some concrete, harden up.
Harden up. That's right.
Harden up.
Yeah. And so I encapsulated that. And so from 8 to 28, I lived with undiagnosed mental health conditions. So OCD, depression, and anxiety. Around 15, I discovered alcohol. And at first it was fun. All my mates were doing it, were going after school. Over time, it became my coping mechanism for slowing my brain down and making me feel good and to de-stress and all these types of things. But it never got in the way of me succeeding. So I had this long public service career, created a young family, started a business, studied, multiple degrees, but alcohol was always there to just kind of keep me level-headed. But around 2020, so I'm not sure if anyone remembers 2020 and what happened. We had COVID and all those types of things.
Yeah.
I experienced what's called burnout, which is prolonged chronic stress. And I've never experienced this before. And it was here that I started to look inwards and started going, you know what, I've got to start talking about stuff. I've got to start sharing my story because it's so important to share. I feel good when I share my story. And I looked at a whole bunch of things in my life, like my finances, what was happening in our household with our family, my career, where I wanted to go. And the podcast just happened to be part of that journey of sharing my story and then getting people like Nathan on the show to share their stories to inspire men across the world to go, hang on a second, if Simon's talking about mental health or Nathan's talking about disability or someone else is talking about whatever the subject is, maybe I can too. We can start challenging these stereotypes of what it was for us growing up, where we were told, don't talk about yourself, just get on with life. So that's where the podcast come from. And now these days, I'm no longer a public servant. I'm a social worker and I have a dedicated men's therapy business. And so I spend every single day talking to men across Australia about their mental health, disability, finances, relationships, you name it, we talk about it. And I do it from a place of I've been there and I've done it. So I get it and I'm here to help. And that's what I love about it.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And today, as I said, today we're exploring the financial stress and the impacts of mental health, in particular for men. All right, we're all three men. We're all young men as well, and we're young professionals, young guys in their own businesses. And there's so much pressure from both the expectation to bring home some crusts for our families, paying for our big fat debts on our homes, covering kids' educations and all that sort of stuff. And sometimes it just becomes a little bit too much for a lot of people. So yeah, the mental health and dealing with it is really important, making sure that you're actually getting on top of it. And one of the big things at the moment is what most Australians are talking about is the cost of living pressures and the pressures with that. So Simon, share your insights to what are the key learnings out of some of the issues that come across your conversations, and how are they impacting people? And then also talk about that process when someone comes to you, what's their general nature of what they're in, how they're feeling, and then how do you go around putting them on the right path?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, a lot to talk about there, a lot to unpack. Let's start off with the issues. I think that's really important to highlight, and you've already talked about a few. So cost of living is huge, right? Petrol is through the roof. I think I fill my car up twice a week, and it costs me more than you can imagine. I used to drink, so I'm like 14 months sober, but alcohol was becoming more and more expensive. A lot of the guys I work with, they smoke, so cigarettes are really expensive.
Yeah.
Medicine. I mean, the government's been talking in the last few months about bringing the cost of medicine down. So I take anti-anxiety medication. My medication, it costs me around $100 a month. And that's gone up about $40 to $50 in the last 2 years. And so managing things like that. So when we've got all these things of we've got to pay for, kids sports, I've got 2 little kids. I've got one in dance, one in soccer, like now in the summer season. So what do we do? Like, do we keep paying for sport? Like the government gives us $200 for footy boots or whatever, but that doesn't go
Yep.
far. Like, so we have all these compounding issues that guys are coming in just from a cost of living perspective. Private health insurance, do we maintain that or do we get rid of it? Stick with the public system, power, water rates, you name it. It's all happening. So these are the cost of living pressures. And then we've got other supplementary issues that kind of inform that as well. We've got forced retirement. I see a few older gentlemen who have worked and worked and worked all their lives, and all of a sudden, because of cost of living pressures for businesses, they're being told that they're now redundant. And so now they're like unemployed, and maybe now they're too old to get another job. They've tried to get other jobs, so they can't readily go into the market. So then they're stressing about being that provider, all of a sudden losing this sense of identity. I was the breadwinner for 10,
I think
20
that's the big one Lionel and I see a lot of.
Yeah, absolutely.
Being their identity attached to their role or their job.
Absolutely.
And also their social network is part of their job as well, and they lose all that. Their contribution to society, it's kind of all interwound, isn't it?
And that's what that was for generations. Like, I look at my dad and his dad, like, work was their identity. And it's a bit different for me. I've had a few different careers, and even my son, he's going to probably have like triple the amount of careers as he gets older. But for the older generations, it is so intertwined with identity. And then we've got things like divorce. Divorce is coming up quite more recently, and cost of living is part of that issue. The stresses of the household. How do we manage the finances of the household, which impacts our relationships? And so relationships break up. And then you've got all these other issues around, division of assets. You've got, do I pay child support? Do I not pay child support? What happens through lawyers and going through court and the costs associated with that? So these are three big issues that we see in my therapy practice: is the cost of living, things like forced retirement and divorce. So these are the issues. And so if we look at these issues, we can't look at them in isolation, because everything impacts everything. Like, everything's intertwined. I'm a contextual social worker. So, what I do in my finances impacts what I do at work, and it impacts my home, it impacts my kids' schooling. It's not just like, oh, you've got a financial issue, let's just deal with that, because there's often a lot more to unpack. And that's where the overwhelm comes. It's the loading and loading and loading of baggage on our shoulders, which is often metaphorical baggage and not physical baggage, but we load it on our shoulders. We want and want and want to provide, but then it just becomes too much. And the world is telling us that we're overworked, we're stressed, there's world conflicts, there's all these external factors that influence us, and then we collapse financially, mentally, physically. There's a whole range of different things that impact us. And so how do these impact our mental health? We're talking about stress. Stress is the easiest one to identify. I think we've all recognized that, higher cost of living brings about more stress. But what does stress look like? It's loss of sleep, it's poor appetite, it's turning to comfort foods, less exercise. Maybe cost of living has become too much. We can't afford to go to the gym anymore, for example. It's disappointment as well. So it impacts our ability, like, as and particularly for men, like, if we can't provide like we used to or we want to, we feel disappointed in our roles. Like, who are we as men if we can't provide for our families? If we can't afford the soccer fees, and we have to tell our children, oh, sorry, mate, you can't do that this year because we just can't afford it. Do you even have that conversation with your son or your daughter or whatever? And then more serious, as we get those stresses, the disappointment, we get things like depression, sadness, grief, sorrow, trauma, and we get stuck in a loop. And this is the real big one for men, is because we're not brought up, and many of us, I'm not saying all of us is a very generalized statement, but a lot of us are brought up not being encouraged to talk about mental health. We fall into a depressive state, but we don't know how to talk about it. So we turn into things like drinking. For me, that was 25 years of drinking. How do I manage my mental health? The only way I know is drinking. And the way I know that is because of our culture. We have a drinking culture. Everything on TV is drinking. Everything in the media is drinking. At home, at barbecues, it's like, oh, I've had a rough day, I'm going to crack open a beer. Other guys, it's drugs, hard drugs. It's hallucinogenics. It's gambling. It's food addiction, porn addiction is becoming a big one as well. Guys trying to find escapes. And as we said at the top, Lionel, I think you said it, it's suicide. That's the ultimate.
That's the end of the
75%.
road. Yeah.
Yeah, 75% of suicide deaths in Australia are unfortunately male, or around about 75%, which is just staggering. And I look at this data as going, why is it so much? And I think it's because we just haven't been taught the language around mental health, and we don't feel comfortable talking about it. And hopefully today's conversation encourages just one person to reach out for help who might be struggling financially or just generally as well. But there's also these other influencing factors as well. So these are how it's impacted, but the influencing, and we've touched on it, is I'm going to get a bit social work here on you. It's these things called social constructs of masculinity.
Yeah.
Who are we as men? What does it mean to be a man? And if we can't live up to that mantra of what it means to be a man, does that mean that we're less of men, that we're weak, that we're unable to manage, unable to provide, unable to support? And there's a lot of shame that comes from that. Shame, and the shame itself actually keeps guys from coming into therapy, because they feel like if I start sharing a story about my well-being, whether it's my mental, my physical, financial, whatever it is, that I'm going to be seen as less than. I'm
Or
not going
they're
to.
admitting it as well to some
Yeah,
extent.
well,
Yeah.
that's right. There's an admission there,
Yeah.
but the admission, and we look at admission as something that's bad.
Mm.
The admission, and we're going to talk about mindfulness a bit later on, is actually acknowledgement that there's something going on that you just need to work through.
Yeah.
And that's the challenge. And for me, the first time I opened up my mouth and said, I think I have a mental health issue, was in 2012. So after 20 years of trying in my head to figure it out and trying to figure it out with the bottle and working out that that wasn't helping at all, and it took my wife to point it out,
Yeah.
it was really hard. I started on the words as they came out, but then the more I did it, and the more I did it, the easier it becomes. And now I do podcasting and therapy as a living because it's just so easy for me now. And I know how hard it was though for guys. And so this is what I do. I'm trying to promote mental health discussions as something that we should be engaging with as much as possible.
100%. I think there's a big link between talking about what's going on in our lives, our feelings, our thoughts, all that type of thing, along with money as well. Because we're taught from an early age not to talk about money. Money's a taboo topic. It's the same with your feelings. It's stop crying, suck it up, all those type of generational words or phrases that gets passed down for generations, which has kind of fostered these statistics really that we've been talking about. So it's trying to
Absolutely.
break down those barriers, which is extremely difficult, which you're seeing day in, day out. And Lionel and I see to some extent, but we probably don't have the skill set or the knowledge at the moment to deal with some of the stuff that we've seen and we've come across,
Yeah.
which is scary in itself because we know there's issues, but we don't know how to apply or adapt or support or offer help either, or
And
even
it,
permission to help.
Yeah, and there's professions like yourselves, or lawyers, or doctors, or dentists, your neighbors. These conversations are happening everywhere. But it's like, what do I do with this? All of a sudden, this person is telling me this, and this actually happened for us in our family of financial stress, many, many years ago, in terms of having a self-managed super fund, which caused a lot of mental distress for us. And there was a lot of shame and taboo. But the only time this came out was actually talking to a financial planner. We're like, oh, this is happening and it's causing us all this distress. And we're like, now what do we do with it? And they're like, well, I'm not your therapist or anything like this, but I can give you some practical tips. So then we followed those tips, got some therapy as well for myself and so forth. But these conversations happen everywhere. It's just, how do we engage with them? And that's the biggest question, is how do we engage with this? And the way we engage with it is exactly what we're doing right now, just talking about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Would
yeah,
there be any other tips, like talking about the engaging side of things, if someone's listening and someone's come to them to open up and start saying some of these conversations or words that we're talking about, is there something they can do to support, or is it more just
Yeah.
listening?
That's a great question, and it really just depends on the person. So if someone just come up to you and say, like, I'm really struggling, like if you feel like you can hold space for a conversation, and holding space is you shutting up, basically,
Yeah.
you just zipping it up, because what we want to do is we want to help, we want to solve their issue. But the best thing is just to be silent and just say, what do you need from me? And hear the story. But there's also a fine line there, because, most 90% of the population, or probably 95% of the population, aren't therapists. They're not trained to do this work. So the best thing you can do is recognize, oh, I'm either okay in the conversation, and that's fine. Sit there, help them out, direct them to their GP afterwards, direct them to a financial counselor. I know there's a whole bunch of free financial counseling services that have popped up all over Australia, which is fantastic. But also recognize your own limits as well. If you're in a conversation, you're like, I can't help you. Like, this is triggering for me for whatever reason, or I'm just over my head. That's okay to say it. Just be honest with say, look, I'm hearing you. I want to support you. Maybe together I'll take you to your GP, or can you go to your GP, or is there somebody else we can phone right now who can help you? Is it one of these financial counseling services? Is it something like Lifeline? Or I like to actually refer to Men's Line, which is like Lifeline, but it's for men, and not many
I
guys
haven't
know
heard of
about it.
that before.
No,
Yeah, that's
no.
that's new for me today. That's
So Men's Line is a free 24/7 service, just like Lifeline, but it's designed for men. And so
yeah.
you can just call them up and sit with them and say, this is someone who's qualified to have this kind of discussion.
We should chuck that in the detail.
We'll put that in the details of the
Links
podcast, because that's awesome.
make sure, because yeah, like stuff that we do on our financial podcast here, we talk about tips and tricks, but this is one thing that we wanted to drag out of you today, is to learn how we can address these things when they come across our conversations, and also make sure helping people to help people have better conversations around it as well. So, but by the sounds of it, a lot of it is just having the conversation, and then by the sounds of it, just zipping it and letting them talk about what's going on, to make sure you're hearing them, to trying to unloosen that pressure gauge on their shoulders with all these different issues that we're facing in life these days.
Yeah, providing you feel safe to do so. Like if you're recognizing, hey, this is a red flag conversation for me, pull the ripcord, you're out, So, I've got to put you onto this other service. Call Mindful Men, call my service or something like, get a bit of advice as to what you can do next. GPs are the best place. Go see your GP, talk to your doctor about this, because they have got local connections wherever you are in Australia to help you through this particularly challenging situation, which so many Australians and people across the world are dealing with right now.
Yeah. So maybe we talk about, Matty, one of the areas that I've seen a lot of our clients come across is that abrupt change in career, when you're talking about that. So a lot of people that, we will speak to, we talk about retirement. Our specialist in our areas is retirement planning and all that sort of, that side of it, and the financial side of it. But on the other side,
Yeah, sorry, Lionel. It's not just that. It's like we've had police officers medically discharged. We've had people from the Defence Force medically discharged. We've had people that have been disabled and can't go back to their roles. PTSD, bullying in the workforce, even. We're seeing a lot more of that. The mental health space going that far that they are disabled and will never return to work. We had a 35-year-old female last week that's happened to. She won't go back to work ever again because of what's happened in the workplace. So I think it's not just limited, but Lionel and I do see mainly this happening around the older Australians as well, particularly men. And coming back to our conversations around that generation, a little bit different to our generation, where we're starting to talk on podcasts and actually deal with some of these things. They're not talking to anyone. There's men's sheds available and they're saying, well, we're not going there. We don't know those men. So from your side of things, Simon, that change of occupation and identity, what are you seeing from your side?
exactly the same. You know, it is that it's a huge identity shift. If you've invested your life into your work and then all of a sudden that's taken away from you, what do you do? And so it's about finding purpose. And this is mindfulness to me. So, you know, Mindful Men is my brand, and I discovered mindfulness through burnout. So I was in a public service career that wasn't lighting me up. I knew I wanted to get into the mental health space. So part of the reason I burnt out was I was working full time. I was studying a master's degree part time. We had two kids under three. I've got
Jesus.
my mental health history, my alcohol use, and COVID all happened, right? And not all at once, because you know a lot of this is when you think about burnout, it's prolonged chronic stress. So this is over years and years and years. So it got to a point in 2020 when I just collapsed, and I made the drastic career change towards mental health. But I was fortunate that I was in a space because I'd been talking about it for so long that I was able to turn that pain that I had had into purpose. And that's a big thing. But the first thing you got to do is get to a place where you're comfortable talking about it. And so it could be a therapist, it could be a coach. We're seeing a boom in life coaches at the moment, mentors,
Mm.
and particularly men's mentors. There's a big service gap here. So anyone listening to this and goes, you know what, I've still got something to give. Mentoring is a great space because it's not therapy, and therapy has its own stigma and shame across the board, not whether you're male or female. People don't want to say, I go to a therapist.
Yeah.
I openly say I'm a therapist in therapy. I love it. Like it does really help me stay on track. But not everyone does. It's got a stigma and shame about it. So coaching, mentoring is a great space to turn into. Community engagement. Loneliness is the next epidemic for men. It's this failure for, I guess, well, not failure, but it's this disconnect from where we grew up, from the people that we knew. Historically, in previous generations, where we've grown up is where we live and work and die. These days, we're nomads. Like it's easy for us to move across Australia or across the world. Like I've lived in 4 or 5 different Australian states and territories. And you know, I'm not from Queensland, but I've lived here for the last few years. But trying to connect in with local Queenslanders on the sunny coast is very difficult. And in fact, my social group is made up of people from Melbourne and people from Adelaide and people from Perth and not from here because they've all done the same. They've all struggled to connect in with local people. And so it's about finding your tribe, rediscovering your tribe, and recognizing that together we can live well and we can manage things like mental health and connection, financial health. We can talk about our finances in our little social groups and whatever that is, just to gain insights from other people. You know, what have you done? What have you done? And then, you know, weigh that up against our own thing. But a lot of it comes from purpose. What is our purpose? And mindfulness is all about finding our purpose and living our purpose. And you know, guys hear the word mindfulness and they go, "Oh, that's a bit woo-woo. It's a bit hippie.
Yeah.
I don't want to engage with that." I was the same. Like I'd heard of mindfulness. I'd heard about mindfulness in the years before I did that, but it really helped me get through burnout. And what it was for me was just being in the moment. Stop being in a future brain, in a future memory, or a distant past memory, or whatever. It was just being present with my wife and kids and being happy in that moment. Because what happens is often in life we live life on autopilot. We get up in the morning, we have breakfast, we get the kids ready for school, we get to go to work, we do whatever we do during the day. We come home, dinner, kids to bed, go to bed ourselves eventually. We might have a bit of TV, a bit of doom scrolling, wake up tomorrow and do it all again. Like it's Groundhog Day for a lot of us. And so
Yeah.
for me, mindfulness is actually stopping and switching off the autopilot and going, what am I doing with my life? What is my purpose? What are my values? What makes me me? And for someone like me, it's someone who no longer bottles stuff up. It's someone who actually wants to find out, why am I struggling? And what can I do about that to not struggle anymore? And recovery for someone with a mental health condition can be a lifelong thing. And I've been doing it for 3 decades. And so I no longer feel the shame and stigma associated with that. I'm embracing that. I'm turning that pain into purpose. A lot of guys struggle in this space. And so one thing that they can do is just get a bit mindful about what they want in life. Yeah, they might have lost their job or their identity or whatever, but how can they turn that around? What can they do differently? What other pursuits can they follow? I work with a guy who has lots of businesses and been very successful, but all of a sudden is kind of questioning his why, his purpose, doesn't know what to do. Like, he's 50 now. And I'm like, well, what have you always wanted to do? And he's like, I'm not sure. All I've ever done is work. So it's about just exploring that, trying different things, turning the subconscious off and turning the conscious on. And you can do that through therapy. You can do that through coaching. You can do that from listening to podcasts like this. Like, podcasts are a great way to just expand our knowledge. I first learned about finances through podcasts as well. I'm not sure if you know the Equity Mates one. I've been listening to that for a few years. I've had the Equity Mates blokes on my podcast as well and had a good chat with them. And the Barefoot Investor, I think every Australian knows that book, and knowledge is power. Once we have knowledge about something, we can then turn whatever that knowledge is into purpose. And once we rediscover that purpose, the world's our oyster. We don't have to just follow the same well-trodden path that we've done for decades. Let's make a new path and go on a new adventure, because this is the age where it's possible. Technology makes it possible. Open borders makes it possible. It's just about maybe getting out of our own way and exploring what those possibilities are.
But talking about purpose and why, for some, particularly men that we come across, it's difficult to articulate or understand what their why is, what their purpose is. A lot of them fall back to, it's my family, just provide for my family. That's my purpose in life. Is there something that you use in your line of work that pulls a bit more or pushes them a bit further to start thinking more about what lights them up or what excites them?
Yeah, absolutely. I love you brought up this question because it's my favorite thing that I do in therapy. So to give someone an idea, and one of the first questions I ask every guy who walks into my clinic or into my service is, have you done therapy before? And most say no, like this is the first time. So I run them through it, like this is what it looks like. And first we start off with, what are the pain points? Why did you even walk in the door in the first place? Once we know all the pain points, and I flesh them out. I'm a talker, as you could probably tell. I flesh them out, and they say, oh, I'm financially stressed. Okay, what does that mean? Tell me the definition. What does that mean to you? Because I've got my definition of what financial stress is, but yours can be completely different. And then that gets us down a little bit of a rabbit warren. And then we go, okay, what else is going on? Oh, drinking too much. Okay, why are you drinking? When did you start drinking? What does alcohol mean to you? What do you drink? And what is that? And so we bring all these contexts together. And then from there we go, okay, this is the mud map of all the things that are going on in your head. What we're going to start doing is working on one tab at a time. Where's the most pivotal thing that you want to deal with? What's the most pressing issue? And we start there. And then from a mindfulness-based perspective, and I've got a little deck of cards, which is fantastic. And this is where therapists have these little resources and tools, and each card has a value on it. So one could be trust, one could be respect, one could be authenticity, one could be financial freedom, whatever it is. And we go through them methodically, going, okay, which ones sing out to you? If you're at a party, your 50th party, your retirement party, and someone that you love, someone that you really or respect is doing a speech about you, and I'm giving away a bit of my therapy tool here. This is not therapy, by the way. If anyone's listening to this, you do need to actually do this with someone in a session.
Yep.
But we talk about it as what are the words, what are the values that they're going to say about you that really sing true? And from there, we get this big deck of cards down to 5 key words. Things like mindfulness could be one. It could be connection, authenticity. It could be freedom. Freedom's a big one. Trust, respect are big ones. And so we go, okay, why did you pick these words? And they're like, well, that's because these are the things that almost get me out of bed. These are the things that when I make decisions, I'm making decisions based on these concepts or these ideas or these values. And they'll be, okay, so you've got all these issues. Let's look at them from your values. What does it mean when you're financially struggling? How is that showing freedom, for example? If freedom's one of your values, and you go out to the pub every Friday night with your mates and spend $500, but freedom for you is actually getting a good bank balance, why are you doing that? Why are you spending the $500 at the pub every Friday night? or on cigarettes or on alcohol or gambling. Gambling's a big one. It's in our face all the time, but like, why are you doing it? Does it make you happy? Most often it's not. Most often it's like a little crutch. It's a habit. If connections of value, like who are you spending time with? Are the people that you spend your time with lifting you up, making you feel good, or are they dragging you down? And so we start unpacking all these life issues from a values perspective and going, what makes you tick? What do you need in life? What do you want in life? And where are you at the moment? And how do we get you to a place where you want to be? And that's how we do it. It's all around switching off the subconscious, switching on the conscious. And then we start going, okay, what are you doing today to live by your values? What's your self-care look like? There's a reason therapists ask you about your sleep, your eating, your exercise, et cetera, it's because that's your basics, your self-care. Once we get all that sorted and they're on board and they're going, oh, yeah, you know what, therapy is actually okay, then we come up with different decision-making tools. And the decision-making tools are values-based. We go, okay, how do we use our values to make good decisions? Like we know the decisions that we automatically make.
Yep.
For some guys, it's like drinking too much. For other guys, it's like, actually, I'm going to put the beer down and I'm going to go for a cup of coffee with my mate instead. So this is how we can draw it out. It is a process, as I said before. Go and speak to someone in person and do it. And your values in different parts of your life will change. So your relationship values are going to be different to your work values, to your social values, to your financial values, but they all do interlink eventually.
Yeah, big piece there is I always speak to clients, what's going to get you out of bed every day is the piece that I talk to a lot of retirees about. So trying to connect those dots through to the next, we're talking about a transition from your working career into retirement, and trying to have a smooth transition is having a well-organized plan of allowing you to go and move from the transition of working into a, and the bigger obstacle that people come to us for first is the financial piece. But soon discovering after I've written a book with another retirement coach is the lifestyle piece is one of the biggest issues that people really have issues with in retirement, because they're not prepared for the lifestyle side of things. They can prepare with us financially because we can have enough money and help them get to a certain level of money and identify what they need to live on. But at the same time, having purpose to fulfill their days of what they're going to be doing day after day after day type thing. So yeah, that's it's very interesting.
And from my side of things, I was probably naive to some of that aspect of it. I had a client in a really good financial situation, 74, 75 years old, still working 5 days a week, and I couldn't understand why he wouldn't retire. Everyone wants to retire, right? But he didn't, because he was losing everything. He had nothing to go to. Like Lionel said, there was no social plan, there was no exercise plan, there was no holiday plan, there was nothing that was going to get him out of bed except for work, until work made him redundant after 40 years. So yeah, all came crashing down on him, which opened up my eyes to having some of these conversations as well, that I need to be more mindful when articulating my financial advice with clients, that it's not just money. They're not just saying no to retirement because of money. There's other external factors around that.
Maybe just touch on that, Simon, on the mindfulness tool. How do you become a little bit more mindful of your situation? Because us as financial advisors, I explain to most people that we're educators first and financial advisors second. We're educating people on their financial situation, giving them different options on what to do, and then helping them with one pathway or a number of different pathways to make sure they go from plan A to plan B or their goal type thing. So just maybe talk about that, the mindfulness tool. How do they identify their trap falls in their mental health side of things?
Yeah, I think the first step is always, we talked about acceptance earlier, or it's awareness, it's acknowledgement that something's going on and it's causing some sort of distress. You're like, if you're thinking about something a lot, then it's probably causing you distress. Like why am I always thinking about my super balance? Or why am I always thinking about this self-managed super fund that I've set up? Like, why? Like, just ask yourself, why am I thinking it? And if you're thinking about this type of stuff, then it's a sign that you need to kind of work through it. And then recognizing that it's okay to talk about it. Like, why keep going around in the hamster wheel in your head? Because that's not going to get you anywhere. You're not going to solve anything there. Put it on paper, talk to someone. And so it's just starting with that acknowledgement, the acceptance is mindfulness in itself. The next part is knowledge is power. Inform yourself, learn about this issue as well. And as we said, it could be a podcast like this, it could be a book that you've read. Financial planners are fantastic. Like and I won't go into our self-managed super fund. That might be another episode where I'm happy to come back on and share that
There's a lot of war
drama.
stories in that area. Like we
But
hear that.
if we had independent financial advice on that situation, we might have saved ourselves thousands of dollars, like lots of money, and our mental health as well. So like talk to people that kind of know what they're talking about, whether it's a financial planner, the financial counselors, even a therapist. Like you come into therapy and they might not be financial therapists. Like you could come to me. I don't know much about finances. In fact, my wife does the finances in this household. But I can still talk to you about issues and getting them out of your head. And then what can you do to rearrange the thoughts so that they don't overwhelm you and so forth. So it's knowledge, it's talking about things. As we said before, it's your values, and then goal setting, as we talked about as well, is like set goals for the future. What do you want the next 1 year, 5 year, 10 year, 20 years to look like? How can you do something small every day that works towards those, that aligns with these values as well? We don't want to live life on autopilot. We want to live values-based lives. And so we've talked about it and talked about it. And it's a lot of it's common sense, but we just don't tune into it because it's not a natural thing for us to think about. But this is mindfulness. We most of us are doing this every day. It's just about putting it all together.
Yeah, so maybe the discussing of the financial strain areas there, because that's what most people are going to jumping on our podcast to be talking about and listening about. So talk about the importance of discussing financial strain openly.
Yeah, well, I think it's combating everything we've talked about. It's combating those social constructs of masculinity that are intergenerational, they're cultural, they're ingrained in us from birth. It's about saying we can actually talk about our finances. Like it's okay. I can talk about my finances, I can talk about my mental health. And I look at it like this, like guys have no hesitation to go to the doctor if they've hurt their leg playing footy, for example. Hurt my leg, going to go to the doctor, I might get a referral to a physio. Let's get that sorted. Just like your car. If your car's not right, working right, you'll take it to the mechanic. There's no hesitation about that. Why aren't we doing the same with our financial health or our mental health? It's all the same. Like if we have an issue, we get the experts in to kind of help us put things into perspective. And so talking about it, getting the experts in is really important. And the more we do it, the easier it does become. And early intervention is good. If you can get this right down early, like Superman, that's awesome. That's what you're trying to achieve on this podcast. Superman, like this is what we're trying to achieve. But any intervention is good. You could get to the day before retirement, or someone who I've got 86-year-olds who book themselves in for therapy, and plus, like it doesn't matter how old you are, it doesn't matter what walk of life you are from, it doesn't matter what the issue is. There's people out there that can sit down with you, talk about it. And it doesn't have to be a therapist, it could be a coach, mentor. It could just be a friend who's got a good head on their shoulders. Like talking about it helps, breaks down the stigma. The more we talk, it breaks down stigma. And COVID was great for that because now everyone's talking about mental health. I love it. And so talking about it normalizes it. And then in 10 years, 20 years time, like mental health will be such a normal topic that you wouldn't need an episode like this anymore. But we do need it right now because there's still so much shame and stigma just associated with talking about these topics. So just start talking.
Yeah. I think one way is I go about talking about it, especially with my kids as well. I think I talk about finances a little bit differently than what most people talk about. Is actually being open about what we're doing, why we're doing certain things with our money, and why we're making certain we buy stuff, what we're putting the value and the importance of what money does for us and what it allows us to do, but then also making sure we're talking about it more freely. So yeah, with your kids, if you're just doing practical everyday things with your kids, going out to the shops and talking about money. And that's probably one thing just to lead into another thing, just to help people help our kids understand the importance of money, but also the importance of value, the importance of time, and the importance of just money is not all about everything as well. It's a means to give you a little bit more flexibility and choices. And that's what we talk about in the retirement phase is money gives you more flexibility and choices. It doesn't give you the lifestyle that you want to live. You've got to create that lifestyle yourself.
Absolutely. It's not everything. Like it's a means to an end. It's energy, as people say in the woo-woo space.
Yeah.
It's energy.
Yeah.
And interestingly, like our kids do hear a lot more than we give them credit for. So a little snippet into my mental health story, and I have this challenge as a small business owner as well, and I won't spend too long on this, is my mum and dad had a small business way back when that failed dismally, and they would argue about finances. And so fast forward 30 years, I've created a small business and I get those memories as well. And so if you can create an environment in the home where you're talking positively about finances and why you're doing things, the importance of saving or investing or, having a strategy and goals, that can go a long way to embedding good financial, I guess, knowledge in our children as well, as opposed to listening to your parents argue about money and then that causing what I call financial trauma later in life, which is what I deal with. And that's why I'm in therapy at the moment, to try and help me get through that mind block so that I can then make better financial decisions for my small business. And so what we do with our kids is very important, and the conversation we have, and the more, I guess, positive they are, the more informative they are, because unfortunately the school system doesn't teach us everything we need to know about financial management. The more we can do that and involve them, I think is fantastic, but doing it in a healthy way and not a way of always doom and gloom, because that's I guess the challenge that we're in at the moment. There is a lot of doom and gloom out there, and it's causing a lot of mental distress across all ages, not just people of our age.
Yeah.
I think the conversation is changing as well, especially in our world, Lionel's world, and my world. We're even seeing insurance companies now. They've changed their perspective on mental health, on depression, anxiety, OCD, where probably pre-2018, they were automatic declines. Now they're talking about, well, what's happening? What's the treatment? What are your symptoms? Are you looking after yourself? Are you sticking to the treatment plan? They ask about the exercise. They're even asking about your network now in insurance applications. How strong's your family network? How supportive is your work environment? So I think it's changing a lot, these conversations. We've got one insurance company that they've even got psychologists and psychiatrists on call. So you don't have to wait, because I understand there can be potential long wait times. You don't have to wait. You can get in within 4 weeks to see one of their approved psychologists and psychiatrists. So there's things in place to try and support more of these conversations that we're having.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that as well, because I've gone through that process myself with my own super, and it's telling your story all the time. But it's also disability as well, where these conversations around mental health and disability are really improving the way that we engage with the world, and we get insurance and coverage and all sorts of stuff, which is great to see. But it all starts with conversations. Just keep it going. So thanks so much for having me on and
Thanks, Simon.
with me.
As we wrap up there, we want to remind our listeners that financial stress and mental health are deeply connected. So as you don't have to face these challenges alone, in today's discussion, I hope something's resonated with someone. So if you're considering reaching out for support, make sure you reach out to Simon.
The
men's, what's it called?
Jump into Mindful Men, so mindfulmen.com.au, or check out the Mindful Men podcast, but also Men's Line Australia. So that's the 24/7 men specific lifeline equivalent as well.
Yeah, so awesome. Whether if you're struggling with anything, financial stress, or need something to talk about too, if your mental health, connecting with a professional is usually a good place to go, especially seeing a doctor or a therapist. But even if you're just reaching out to speak to a mate, it can always be sometimes a life-changing phone call or a connection or a coffee, you know what I mean? So reach out. It ain't weak to speak. But thanks for coming on, Simon. We really appreciate you spending some time with us and the Superman podcast, Matty.
Thanks, Simon. Appreciate it.
Cheers, legends.
Cheers.